What's going on, everybody? Welcome to The Obsession. I'm Karl.
I am Mike Stadler.
Late January, Mike.
That is correct.
We got a bunch of questions from everybody.
New year.
New year.
New deer.
New.
Yeah!
Right.
That's what I'm talking about right
That's
there.
a t-shirt right there, baby.
That's what I'm talking about. $1 million idea.
$1 million
Somebody's
idea.
going to steal it on great.
Oh, there you go. Brought it out to the public without patenting it. Should we start with some you got or some I got?
Hey, why don't you take one first?
All right. Let's see. This is kind of a tough one. How do I reassess my land for this year based off of what I seen last year? And that's from Dave. So how do we assess or reassess our land? Because we do reassess our land every year.
Well, we were just talking about reassessing our land.
We were actually.
Literally. And we've been talking about reassessing our land.
Every day.
Right. One of the big things is, two things. What worked.
Right.
What did not work, And, obviously we know what worked here. We wouldn't know what worked at your property. So those are the things, do you want to really mess with those a lot?
Yeah. There's a lot of thinking involved.
It's hard to say with that, and I think, we focus more on the stuff that didn't work.
Yes.
And I guess a couple things before you get into that. What didn't work, what didn't work about it. So,
right.
Are you looking for, no movement? Are you looking for bucks only? When are you hunting it? There's a lot of factors.
Right. And I think in general, he was talking about, his property, from what I remember, his property is like 52 acres, southwest Wisconsin. But it's kind of weird because it doesn't have a ton of terrain. When we assess our properties, for instance, I'll give them for instance for this year. So we put corn in on my property this year. And we made 2 upper plots, and we thought, man, this is going to be great. They're going to filter around both sides of this. They're going to come down, Well,
on paper.
Yeah, on paper. That was not a good move. What it did was, if I put the food closer to the tree line, and I'll show you guys that on the video here. And we had one tree there, we called it the G spot, and we thought, man, this is going to be perfect. And it had its opportunities. The problem was the food was too close to where the does were bedding, so the does bedded up higher, which pushed the bucks actually off my property. Onto the neighbors. And the neighbors, they had actually done some stuff too. They had logged, which was fine, but it did create a little bit better bedding up there. So half of it was my fault, and half of it was the neighbors made an adjustment also. And I don't think it was for deer. I think they just pulled it off for making a little bit of money and having the cash. But that being said, that was a big mistake on mine. So Mike and I have talked already this year what we're going to do to prevent that. So putting some switchgrass and stuff in for me. But you always have to reassess your properties. Like Mike said, what was wrong on your property last year that you noticed that changed deer movement substantially? That may have either made it better in one spot of your property and worse in another. Yeah. So what do you have to change to fix it?
Right. Yeah, here, we had a huge idea, and we started it. It was really early spring. We laid out, the three small kill plots inside the corn, on my field edge here, and thought, this is going to be awesome. 3 different stand locations, separate, segregate our deer. Yeah, it was great. Deer,
Yes.
Which made it almost unhuntable in the morning, which was already hard to hunt.
Yeah.
So we actually made it worse. It moved all the movement in the bottom.
Yes.
Completely changed, which is where we've always had the most success and the most luck, because it's a spot we can stay out of until that time. Yeah. Now, but then later it made the middle stuff we did good.
Right.
The movement there was good, but access wasn't great. Too much food,
Too much food.
just like yours.
Yes.
Too much food, too close to bedding, moving their bedding,
Yep.
then they're bedding closer. You know, the does are bedding closer,
Yep.
closer to the edges.
You know, I think on both of our properties, or any small property, I think the number one thing that people have to remember is you know, what we call depth of cover. So, especially, let's just take a 40 for instance. If you've put all your food in the middle of a 40, you basically have 150 yards each direction to your property line. So that doesn't give you depth of cover.
Yeah,
150 yards.
You have deer everywhere around that.
Right. You know, like you said, our mistake this year was putting on your property is putting those 3 small kill plots in, and it did bring more deer in. I think
did.
you held more deer on the property. So the thought of separating the doe groups worked.
Yeah.
Problem was separating those doe groups and then being all over the place made it difficult for us to get in and out. And then the buck movement changed completely.
Yes.
Your best spot was not your best spot.
So it would have been good if you could hunt it in September,
Right.
the first weekend.
Yeah.
There's
yeah.
bucks all over in it.
Yeah.
But there was nothing there later. Like I only think I hunted it 2 times, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's not where any of them were anymore. And they have always been in that bottom.
Right.
You know, so that's one of the things you gotta assess, you know, did you do something to a great spot that drastically changed it in the wrong direction?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because obviously that's one thing you don't want to do.
Yeah.
You know.
A lot of people don't think you can have too much food, and you can really have
Yeah.
too much food.
We both did it.
Yeah, we did.
We both did it.
Both did
And
that.
that's, everybody laughs, oh, I had too much. Well, it's too much,
Yeah.
you know. And then, you know, the deer numbers being up are good, but then they're not good.
Because you can only hold so many
You
deer.
can only hold so many deer, you know, we talk about that all the time, so you gotta look at your numbers there. And, you know, now, like I've gained animals here,
Yes.
which is nice now,
Right.
because there's gonna be good bucks that have been in here, they've been checking this out, not saying they're going to stay here over the winter. They've
Right.
been here, checked it out, you know, there's does here, they're gonna be back.
Yeah.
That's the best part, they're gonna come back.
Right.
But yeah, you know, one thing I like to do assessing it, which I told you this a couple weeks back, I like to get this little fresh snow,
Yep.
and I went through my property on the Wheeler and looked at the trails,
Mm-hmm.
the heavily used trails. You know, so are these trails that I've utilized or that we've utilized already? You know, or is this something, a different travel pattern? Because if they're traveling them now,
Yep.
they were traveling them before.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell everybody what you did with those trails?
Yeah, so I found these trails all throughout the property. I went from one end to the other
Yep.
on the Wheeler,
Yep.
because I was pulling my cameras out.
Right.
And I have the little, you know, steel springy flags.
The
Like
electric company.
Yeah, like
flag?
electric company flag, you know, with the colored top. And I just stuck them in the ground,
Mark.
you know, where I mark these trails. And it's neat to see how one big trail will come out and Y off, and the 2 opposite directions it'll go,
Mm-hmm.
both ways, you know. So I did that all throughout the property, and I found quite a few,
Right.
which once we go back in there, you know, you'll see those,
Right.
that maybe you can utilize them, or maybe you're like, I shouldn't be here.
Right. Because I can't hunt.
Yeah,
this
I'm
with
too
this
close
weather.
to this. You know,
Yeah.
that's one good thing I like to do, is to want to look at those trails in the winter. We've talked a lot about winter is one of your best times to scout.
Of course. Yeah.
You know.
As close to the season as you can. I mean, right now, here in Wisconsin, Mike's place and my place, because we're in the southern part of the state, bow hunting's still open till the 31st of this month. I know. Ridiculous.
Great.
Yeah, it's great. But if you had a buck tag, it might be.
Yeah.
But you know, there's still a few people out there trying to shoot a buck, but right now is a great time to be scouting. You should be scouting and marking, like what Mike said. Mark your trails, because when the snow melts here in March, whatever, April, you're not going to see the same thing.
Yeah, it's hard to see that
Yeah.
stuff.
So now, all of a sudden, the woods is open, you've got the marked trails, and you can kind of decide at certain points, okay, Do I want to do some hinge cutting here, some TSI here? Maybe I want to make these deer move down and around, which will give my current tree stand location a better opportunity.
Right.
Mock scrape, water hole deal, however.
Right.
That's going to be a pretty big deal. That's part of the reassessing of the property.
Yeah.
You know, I think you should reassess. I mean, constantly, especially even when you're hunting.
We over-assess. I like to call it over-assess.
We did that this year for
Yeah,
sure.
we're assessing, I mean, honestly, every time.
Oh, yeah.
We're in your property, my property, we're always looking at stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of it's a time passer when you're sitting in a stand.
That's true. That's true.
You're like, well, that really looks like that sucks over there.
Yeah.
How come I didn't do anything with that, you know? But put that stuff down. Like, I put notes in my phone.
Oh, yeah.
I do it at your place, I do it here,
Yeah.
because that's what we're trying to do. Everybody's trying to kill a big buck.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it is what it is.
If you say you're not, you're lying.
Yeah, 300%.
300%.
So, I mean, that's big things like assess now a lot, assess the whole time you're hunting.
Right.
Use your cameras for sure. That's what we got them for.
Yep.
You know.
Here's the other thing about assessing your property too. So I was talking to Mike earlier. So on my property alone with the cameras I had, and I'm sure he has as many, well, maybe not as many pictures because he doesn't run quite as many cameras as me because he's got cell cams.
I don't run 500 cameras.
Wait a second.
450.
But anyway, you know, we're looking at over 130, 140,000 pictures. Okay, this year alone. And I break it up two ways. So I'll take pictures of just the bucks, okay, on the property, and if I name them or whatever, they're there. So it's grouped into 1.5 year old bucks, and then the bucks I would shoot. So there's 1.5 year old, 2.5 year old deer that are unnamed, and then there's 3.5 year old, 4.5 year old, and older bucks that I name usually, because those are target deer for me. Then I also have all those pictures, and all the tree stands are located. And those pictures are in there too. And if you notice there's certain trends, you can actually pattern your deer. I've got bucks on, and it's only 72 acres, I got bucks on one side of my property that are never on my other side of the property. And I have bucks that are down low that are never up high,
Yep.
and vice versa. So when people say, you know, your bucks leave certain areas, they still have their zones that they stay in, and all year. It's kind of cool to see, even on a smaller piece of property, whether it be 20 acres or 10 acres, you'll see that. You know, and that's important information too, especially for the next year, because bucks are telling you something every time they go out there. And they're telling how your property is working in one spot or the other, and that's where the reassessing comes in and why we do it constantly.
Right.
That, you know, for instance, the stand, the lock on, you and I talked about it earlier, the lock on that you and I hung in the heat. We both decided that that area needs to be thickened up.
Yes.
And the only movement buck-wise that was there was during the rut. And the only reason they were crossing that, see, the hard part about that spot is they could stand on top of the ridge, look down to the valley, and part way, 3/4 way up the other side and see if there's anything in there. So they don't even go down in there, even though there was a mock scrape there. Now, come November, the first week of November, last week of October, first 2 weeks of November, basically, started getting good buck movement through there because they're transitioning.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
if we want it utilized all the time, we have to thicken up, and we know that.
Yes.
So that's what we'll be doing, one of the projects on my property.
Right.
You know, and you know the reassessment is a 365, guys. You have to think about it constantly.
Yeah, I know we've also talked about if you guys are out there doing the mock scrapes, you know, look at how those got used or if they got used. I got, you know, another couple here that I'm gonna move again. So
the other thing we should add there is I never put a mock scrape up without a camera on it,
right.
because then you're not learning anything if you have a mock scrape and no camera.
That is correct.
Yep. Because I mean, how many times do we see deer hit our mock scrapes and they'll rub on it, you know, put their preorbitals on it, they'll lick it, chew on it, all that, but they never scrape underneath it with their hook.
Right.
So at that point, most people,
Yeah, you're
if it was
thinking they're not
dry,
getting used.
they're not being used.
And you know, we hung one, you know, here which we talked about last year, that I hung and I had my wife help me. Remember that?
Yep,
I strung it across that trail coming down.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a great spot. Trails coming off that, and I ran a camera on that thing.
Yep.
From that day until 2 weeks ago, 3
Mm-hmm.
weeks ago, I don't think I had one buck that touched it.
Right.
They walked right past it. If they walked past it, they walked past it.
Right. But where did you shoot your deer?
But I shot my deer literally 20 yards from that mock.
Out of your state.
Yep.
Yeah.
On a trail we thought would have movement, but now I see, which is one of the trails I just talked about marking.
Yeah.
I marked that trail, which it actually turns into 2 trails
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't know coming off where I
Mm-hmm.
shot him, which is good to know. So that mock's going to get moved inside
Yep.
that trail. Like you don't have to sit on it,
No.
but now I can almost guarantee you that they are going to use that walking back and forth across that,
100%. Because be right in their face.
and they're scent checking that anyway.
Yep.
So, you know, when you think about, like I think about it now, like why wouldn't I have put it there before? You know,
Right.
but you learn.
Yeah.
You're assessing it, you're learning it, you know, and
Plus, the other thing we did there too is you put those big pine trees in there to help
Right.
promote that movement of the
Yep.
trail too.
and that's another thing I was going to say. So now looking at those, I know because we want to plant more,
Yep.
and I know now where I want to put some trees
Right.
because I don't want to stop that movement.
No.
Yet I want that thermal cover and the regular cover.
Mm-hmm.
So that helps.
Yeah.
Now
So
we know.
you're gonna take your money, buy your trees, which are expensive,
Yes.
and you're gonna put it in the proper place to utilize that spot even more
Yep.
and help promote that deer movement in that stand, which is a great stand.
It is. It is.
So, I mean, that's kind of how we go about doing it. We're constantly reassessing our property. Every time we're in the tree, every time we're out there, all the pictures we get, whether it be on cell cams or on regular pictures when I pull chips out there at my place, you know, when you ask how do you do it, you have to constantly be thinking, why is this deer here? Why is he using this particular trail?
Mm-hmm.
And where is he coming from? Where does he start? Where does he finish? Why is he going through there?
Yeah.
If you can start figuring that out, you're going to be able to be far more effective on your property, I think.
Yep.
Got anything to add on that?
No, I don't. It's I think people just got to listen to a couple little key things in there.
Yeah.
That'll help you. You know, like look now, look at your cameras, look at individual deer.
Yep.
And how they travel, because if you do, a lot of people look at it, I think they just gloss past, oh, I got a big buck here.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
But like we've had the same here, not to get into it again, but that have never ever entered the other side of the property.
Yep.
And I have 40.
Yep.
And I had one deer for 3 years, never crossed halfway over my property.
Landlord?
Never. Yes. Not one time did I have a picture of him on the other end of the property, ever. And nobody else ever knew him.
Right.
You know, so think about that stuff, use it.
Right.
You know, that's a good way to hunt them.
Your deer are educating you right now, too. That's the only other thing I would add. All these pictures and everything we're talking about, your deer are educating you. If they made it through, if you have pictures of them now after the season, they've educated you on what they're going to be doing next week. And you can plan now to be successful next year.
Yes.
So, thanks for listening to The Obsession. Appreciate you guys listening. You guys watching on YouTube, we appreciate you guys watching. Obviously, for you guys who listen on the podcast, just so you know, every week, just like the podcast coming out every week, you guys can watch it. There's a little bit of added content, there's videos and pictures and stuff as we're speaking here. So you guys get a chance to check that out on YouTube, subscribe to the channel there, we appreciate that. Appreciate you guys listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeart Podcasts, RSS.com. Apple, iHeart, Google, Spotify.
There it is.
There it is.
I don't remember. We're getting old.
Takes us a while. We'll catch up with you guys next week. Thanks for listening to The Obsession.
Later.